Okay, I'd like to present a second situation, and this one is, I think, the Nat situation is one of the classics in the world of ethics, and this situation is something that is a little more 21st century. George teaches a group of fours, and he's been told to schedule 90 minutes of literacy and math instruction each day. George has found that the other teachers at the center are conducting 90-minute didactic, large group instructions on literacy and on mathematics, and some of them are using worksheets. And George is questioning this. So what do you think is going on in George's mind?
Well, I have to say, I'm glad that George is questioning it. If he went to a good early childhood teacher education program, he probably learned that that was not the most effective or appropriate way to teach young children. And this has been recurring a long time, but there's more of it now. Yeah, it's been exacerbated lately as we've become more focused on academics. So George is facing a dilemma because his understanding of what's worthwhile and appropriate curriculum is not consistent with what he's being asked to do. Mm-hmm. And so the conflict is between what he's learned and what he believes about child development and appropriate teaching, and the desire to be a good colleague, a good employee, to keep his job, mm-hmm. to get along, to have good relationships. This is a difficult dilemma, and lots of teachers face it. Okay. It is an ethical dilemma because it involves questions of right or wrong. Is it right to expect a 4-year-old to sit still for an hour and a half a day and do academic tasks? And lots of us would say, no, it's not. There is a moral dilemma to this. Is it right to be a good employee and do what you're expected to do in your workplace? Yes, that's also right. So you have a dilemma. And I think it's really a dilemma between appropriate practice and some other ideas about what would be a good idea to do in early childhood mm-hmm. programs. And those are tied to increasing pressure to deal with program outcomes and measures and things like that. So the teacher has responsibilities to the children. He has responsibilities to the program administration and to some extent to colleagues who are behaving in a different way, in ways consistent with this directive toward academics. Here, the core value is very powerful because there's a core value way up toward the front of the core values that everybody agreed on, which says we will base our work on knowledge of how children develop and learn. So until we change that core value, that's what we believe. Mm-hmm. And George is being asked to base his work on something that isn't consistent with ideas mm-hmm. of how children learn. So this one's a little bit tricky. The first thing we're going to do is look at P1.1. We shall not harm children. This is really interesting because we don't, as far as I know, we don't really have a way to say or to prove that an hour and a half of math and literacy activities a day will harm a child.
Right.
In some cases, they might. So I think that's the first thing you want to say. Is this really harmful to children? If you see children starting some of the testing situations in early childhood, I think kids have really gotten sick. Mm. You know, when kids start to not want to come to school or they start to throw up at that group time, then you really may come to the point where you say, I cannot do that because it's harmful to children. But we don't really know. Mm-hmm. If the teachers are if they're kind teachers and they're doing it fairly nicely and they have a break in between and they get to wiggle and do some finger plays in the middle, may not harm children. We have P1.2 that says we shall care for and educate children in positive emotional and social environments. That might be a factor. We have some obligations to establish good relationships with colleagues. We have an obligation, these are ideals, so that's something we want to aspire to, getting along with our colleagues. We have another ideal, which is to assist the program in providing the highest quality of service. Well, somebody decided, that's really interesting, isn't it? There was probably somebody somewhere that persuaded that school administration that this would be a high quality of service. And I would probably suspect in that situation that parents are nervous about the next school and their kids' readiness, so they may have asked for it, and the school is trying to get along with the parents. We have a principle that says we'll follow program policies. It also says in P3B1, when we do not agree with program policies, we shall attempt to effect change through constructive action within the organization. So I'd say bingo on that one. That's George's marching orders first. And then there's some other things that are a little less relevant to this situation. So I think this situation calls for finesse. Unless there really is, unless it's being done in a way that's harmful to children. And I've had a lot of students in teacher education, students at universities who've been through this. And I think probably what George wants to do is find some ways to help inform that director and that staff that there are alternatives. We can teach these skills in different kind of ways. You know, another factor here that you didn't talk about is how long has George been there?
Yeah.
If George was hired last week, he might just want to do what he's required to do in the most appropriate way he can, and maybe model that you can do this in a more playful way. You can do it in a more appropriate way. You can do it through dance, you know, so he may be creative and then let people look at it. But if he's a new teacher, he may want to just grin and bear it.
Yeah.
If he's been there 5 years and he's respected, he's in a completely different situation. So that really is it depends on your relationship. It also depends on at some level, for some teachers, it gets to the question, can I work in a program that asks me to do this?
Yeah.
Can I meet both needs? Can I serve the children in the way that I think is right? And can I be a good member of this staff? There was an article early on in the young children articles that dealt with a situation like this, that talked about the point at which a person has to say, I cannot in good conscience continue to live in this program and work in this program. So sometimes you just can't do it because you really believe that it is harmful to children, or it violates your own beliefs so badly you just can't live with it.
Right.
And sometimes you say, okay, I'll hang in, I'll show them some different ways to do it. I'll bring in the new developmentally appropriate practice book. I will bring in NAEYC videos. I will call my local AEYC and ask them to come out. So this is one that I think calls for a lot of examining of the situation and a lot of individual discretion, but probably one that would be best to begin with seeking to finesse the situation.
Right. And it has both parts. It has some ethical dimensions to it, and then it also has our knowledge of the profession and what is developmentally appropriate, and not saying that, no, we don't do math and literacy in our program, but we do math and literacy in a way that's more developmentally appropriate than children sitting for 90 minutes.
So for the right person, this is an opportunity to help your administrator and colleagues gain a different kind of understanding.
Right. And finding a way to do it with finesse.
And in the worst situation, you might just have to say no.
Just say, no, I can't do this.
I had a master's student who analyzed a situation very much like this in a master's paper. And she tried for a year to do everything she could to change a whole staff and a whole culture in a school to be more appropriate. And she concluded, but after a year, that they really didn't want to change, and she really couldn't continue to participate,
Yeah.
and she left that job.
Yeah.
But that is a very hard decision, and
It
you
is.
don't do it lightly.
It is. And I want to end this on a more positive
Yes,
note.
oh, good.
I think we all know of many situations where when you study the situation, you can say, oh, I do know a way to get 90 minutes of math and literacy in my day, and I know how to do that in a way that is more developmentally appropriate.
Yeah,
So,
and I might help
yeah.
other people.
And it
If
might help other
people see
people.
my kids having a good time,
Yeah.
they'll try it.
That's right. Okay.